Hello, I'm William Gallagher. This is one more thing, and this week there are supposed to be a lot of things to be one more thinged about. I just don't entirely think there are. This week, you see, is CES, registered trademark, the Consumer Electronics Show, of which people are, it's fair to say, a tiny bit divided. They're kind of divided into three parts. People who've never heard of it don't care. People who, like me, say it's a shrug. This week's co-presenter, Mike Wuerthele, managing editor of MacNN, somewhat disagrees, don't you, Mike?
No, I actually don't really. CES is a week of hell. So, but yeah, a little bit of mental gymnastics for the for the listeners this week, as only one British accent and one New England accent.
Yeah, but it's England, isn't it? It balances out.
Yeah, same thing. Yep.
But CES, registered trademark, by the way, if it's a shrug, why is there all this fuss about it everywhere, every year?
CES is fascinating because it's the one thing the entire industry except Apple agrees upon. It's let's all get together and talk about all of our products that may or may not ever see the light of day. We've covered it for years. We covered it in MacNN when Apple used to go to the show, and in fact, Apple has on occasion had competing events with the old Macworld Expo. And then a couple years ago, they decided, well, since Steve was sick, we're not going anymore. And then they just said after that, just screw you guys, we're not coming at all. It is a cluster. There are so many things that come out. It is so hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. Like, for instance, smart bras and refrigerators with screens on them and networking peripherals and about every Windows PC ever will all be announced in the next 48 hours.
The thing is, you know about all of them. And I heard about an exciting reveal of a smart fork that can actually detect when you're eating too much based on how often you pick it up to shovel stuff in your face. Only, I know all about that. I saw that last year, the year before, and it's the same company, the same fork, the same design. I think the only thing I disagree with you so far is that you said things that might or might not come out. I'd put money. Nothing announced here will ever come out in the form it's announced, at least. I mean, have we ever tracked the success rate of CES registered trademark?
It feels like he added that because we got some very stern press warnings before the CES, and this is how you discuss the CES. Well, you know what? I'm going to discuss it any damn well I please. It feels like it's about 40%. It feels like it's about 40% actual shipments, but that's heavily biased toward routers and computers, as opposed to some of these other wacky Bluetooth whatevers. I think it might be a little higher this year because this year appears to be the year of CarPlay and USB-C. So I think that those are more certain things than some of the pie-in-the-sky things like Bluetooth toilets we've seen before. And you laugh. Bluetooth toilets are a thing.
No, I don't laugh. I'm thinking of, I'm not sure I'm going to admit this, but how often I read on the low. And a little Bluetooth notification every now and again. Yeah, all right, maybe I laugh a little bit. 40% is pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's actually going to be higher this year. I'm guessing it's going to be closer to 65%, just because of its focus this year.
We need to handicap this in some way. Come back next year with some sort of account of how well. That'd be a really boring research job, wouldn't it? Maybe we'll just say, good luck with that.
Well, it is in Vegas.
Well, there you go. I didn't realise that's where it is. Of course, I was a journalist on PC magazine in the UK, and there was some event, it might have been CES, where I was actually not allowed to go because I don't drink. And they honestly believed it was a waste of alcohol.
Yeah. CES is like that. For the longest time, the Adult Video Expo was held at the same time, just down the hallway.
There's no doubt for the expo.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're doing that this year or not, but for years and years and years, the two events were parallel. And that's just the kind of environment. It's just a raucous party environment for trade show attendees.
Okay. Listen, you know this stuff. How old is CES? How far back does all this stuff go?
The show has evolved over the years. It hasn't always been called the CES. I think that changed. Well, now it's actually called the CES. but I think it's only been called the Consumer Electronics Show since about 97 or 98 or so. But to be honest, I'm not perfectly clear on the history just because I'm so deeply mired in the muck on this just every year. I don't have the time to look up and check it.
Well, I kind of hope that it's 40 years because have you noticed what else is 40 years old this year? One company, you might have heard of it.
Oh, really? Go ahead. Do tell.
I think it's Microsoft, isn't
I
it?
think you're right.
I think so. This week on MacNN.com, we're starting a year-long celebration of, well, celebrations are too nice a word, an investigation, but a little bit of celebration of Apple's 40th year, because it's nearly died so often, and yet here it is taking over the world and things. And along the way, we're going to be examining the various things it's done. I love the fact that we're doing this in MacNN's 20th year as well. But the base of it is every week we are now looking at what happened on this week in Apple history. So it might be January 76 and then the next thing happens in January 88 or something. We're slicing the history and finding really unexpected connections. And we began this week with a piece of just gold to me. The Apple Marketing Philosophy, written in 1977 by not Steve Wozniak, not Steve Jobs, but the other one, Mike Markula. Mike, am I pronouncing that correctly?
It sounds like you are. That double K in there is a pain.
Yes. What was he? I blame the parents, really. On January the 3rd, 1977, which was a significant date because that's when Apple was actually incorporated, Mike Thingy wrote The Philosophy of Apple, and you would recognize it to this day. For one thing, it's very simple. It's a one-page memo, for a start, a company doing one pages. It's 3 paragraphs, and the very first one is called Empathy. Apple, we will truly understand their needs better than any other company. Now, maybe that's a case where simplicity went too far because you're going to have to explain that by they and their, I mean their customers. It talks later about how we may have the best products, the highest quality, the most useful software, but if we present them in a slipshod manner, they will be perceived as slipshod. I'm starting to rate this like I'm making a speech. That's how it feels. It's very stand up, be proud. We will present our software and products in a creative, professional manner, and this will impute the desired qualities. So basically, you do it well, people think well of you. And that's what he said 39 years ago. And I'm not sure that Apple always stuck to that, but they're doing it now, aren't they?
I think they are. Even if you go back and you think about the Apple II line, maybe not the Apple I so much, but if you think about the Apple II, it was very well produced, it was very well presented, it was just a well-designed piece of hardware that you can put down and get started without much hand-holding. Depending on what side of the fence you sit on right now, depending if you sit on the OS X or iOS side, primary these days, you're going to have different opinions about that statement. OS X has gone less computery, more user. The iOS has gone more walled garden, I think, than it's been. So for our regular listeners, for our tech head regular listeners, you may disagree with some of these sentiments, but no one has done more to make the computer an appliance for everyone than Apple has over the last 40 years.
I agree, and actually that's what I like. I used to be so into getting these things to work, and then one day I realised I spent all this time actually writing books and scripts. And once I made that mental switch, I found it hard to go back. The thing for me about Apple, that's why I like Apple products. The reason I'm so interested in their history over 40 years is they survived. Those near-death experiences, the number of times we're told it's doomed, I think that must be weekly now. Apple is still standing, and nobody else is. I mean, seriously, nobody else. Microsoft survives from those same early days, but it's only now, 40 years on, that they're making computers. Every computer manufacturer that Apple's original Mac competed against is gone. I think technology is a really tough game, and it continues to be tough. This week, Samsung announced that it's taking a bruising. Mike, what are they telling us?
Samsung came out to the South Korean press and said that it's an exceptionally challenging business environment. and that you can expect growth to decelerate this year. They didn't really say a lot. They didn't say, okay, well, look, we're going to get absolutely utterly hammered. And yes, the thing is, for every business in the world right now, it is an exceptionally difficult business climate. And some of our competitors have kind of taken this and run with this to talk about how Apple has curb stomped Samsung into oblivion. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think that that's got that much to do with it. The Apple still buys an awful lot of chips from Samsung in the form of DRAM and SSD and flash memory, and that's not going to change. There's reports that the A10 processor is going to be handled by a different company, but we don't know that. We don't know that for sure. And honestly, neither does Samsung. It's Samsung deals with a lot of crap. Samsung does a lot of refrigerators and TVs and forklifts and 9,000 other things. And I think that the weakness in the entire world's economy has got more to do with this than Apple curb stomping Samsung.
But it's so much more fun if it is. Yeah, it isn't really. It's easier. The one figure I read, you said Samsung aren't saying details, and they aren't. They don't list any figures at all. But I read through all the analysts, and you know how analysts are. They're expert at this stuff. It boiled down to, as far as I could read it, that Samsung will only make $5.4 billion profit for the last quarter. So, yeah.
Yeah, don't feel too bad for them, really.
Samsung, of course, I mean, despite all these other things you mentioned, and really, forklift trucks, I didn't know that one.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, that's diversity in the workplace. I like it. No, that's a different diversity. Okay. Samsung makes Android phones, and it seems to me, looking around, that quite a few people seem to like Android. So it's not, I don't think it's a wild and crazy bet to suggest that maybe quite a few of those Android phone users are also on Facebook. What I think is a little wild, and seems at first a wee bit crazy, is that allegedly Facebook, the company, has been intentionally breaking its own Android app in order to test customer loyalty. Now, this claim comes from a source called The Information, a technology service that, to be honest, I hadn't heard of before this. And as we speak now, Facebook ain't talking. So let's all just keep repeating the word allegedly to yourself. Allegedly, the idea was to see, what do you have to do to drive people away from Facebook? And in a certain sense, the whole experiment was a failure because nobody left. They put up with the crashes. Now, I'm an iPhone user, so I'm thinking the Facebook app running on Android, who could tell whether it was broken or not? But Mike, if Facebook really did this, why would Facebook really do that?
No, well, I'm not convinced they did. The Android development environment is a little bit different than the iOS. There's a lot of variables to be considered in absolutely everything you do. If you change a storage IDE on your app, then you run the risk of it breaking on other phones, and then you got to change it back. And everyone says that how hard is it to code X feature? And the thing is it's really hard. It's really hard on Apple, and it's really hard on iOS, and it's harder on Android. So I'm not sure I buy the checking to see what will drive people away from Facebook, because I don't think they care. I think there's enough regular user churn. I think there's enough new people signing on and old people leaving that it just doesn't matter.
So I'm not a Facebook fan, and I'm more likely to believe that it died. But you've got to trust somebody called The Information, haven't you?
The Information is actually a pretty reliable source in my experience over the last couple of years. The thing is, though, sometimes in the tech industry, it's really hard to tell the difference between truth and rumor and stock manipulation. And I'm not sure that this is stock manipulation, but this really feels like something somebody said on Reddit and just kind of escalated into a life of its own. That's really what this feels like to me.
And you don't take Reddit as gospel?
No, I'm afraid not. I mean, there's a lot of truth to be had, but there's also a lot of people making assumptions about things.
Bizarre. Much as I prefer iOS to Android, right? I think, as you and I said before, I do actually. I like that there is a variety, even if I'm not using it. I mean, here in England, we have BBC Radio 3, long-standing classical music channel, and there's a kind of running joke that it's nice to know it's there. Even if you don't listen to it yourself, it's nice to know. And the same thing, much as I can't imagine actually swapping to Android just from experiences when I've tried it. I'm certainly not going back to Windows after all the years of struggles with it. I like that these are out there because I think Apple, that I do like using, is made better by there being competition. And equally, to be totally fair about it, Samsung itself is made better by waiting to see what Apple does, and so on. It goes round and round like that. Back in the day, and this is kind of going back to our history of Apple and other technologies, back in the day, everyone was making computers and they were all different. And I think that was a wild time, and a dangerously wild time, because some people were using what's being called custom computers. And I think you have to call these people utter idiots. It's just one of them was a very successful idiot.
Strangely compelling, isn't it? To step through there and lose oneself in another world.
I am a fool. A tricorder is capable of recording even at this speed. I've missed taping centuries of living history which no man before has ever...
Dr. McCoy! Bones, no!
Gene Roddenberry reused a typewriter when he wrote the original Star Trek proposals, but sometime between then in the 60s and his death in 1991, he switched to computers, not shockingly. But according to data recovery firm Drive Savers, Roddenberry, for some reason, had two custom-built computers. And we're not talking Apple stickers on the side. These were computers unlike any other in every sense. The software was unique. The hardware was presumably standard parts, but assembled uniquely twice. Strange version of the word uniquely. But anyway, this has become a bit of a problem because since Roddenberry died, one of the two computers got sold off somewhere and the other just is no longer working. It's unfixable. And there he is with this massive estate, many years. I mean, he died in 91, and it's only very recently they got to these. Somewhere in the pile of his documents, they found 200 floppy disks. And they really were floppy. They were the 5¼ inch floppies rather than the smaller, harder 3.5-inch diskettes that, say, the Mac used. 200 floppy disks found in Roddenberry's archives. This Drive Savers company says it took them 3 months to write software in order to be able to just read this stuff. And then a year to slog through getting all the data off. A year for 200. I mean, I have a box full of floppies and I'm just going to leave them there. They won't say what the data is that they've recovered yet. They drop hints that this is a Star Trek anniversary year, so I think we're going to find some announcements soon. But it is documents. It is Roddenberry's personal work. So working this out on fingers and checking Wikipedia, the capacity of a 5¼ inch disk, it did vary, but absolute maximum was 1.2 megabytes. So 200 of those, full to the brims, if they were, is a maximum 240 megabytes. Now, we have no clue about the special software that Roddenberry wrote on. You don't know the name, the file format, nothing. But if it were plain text, that the most it could be, the maximum it could have written in that space is the equivalent of 160,000 pages of typed text. So, although 200 floppies sounds really small to me, there is a potential there for a lot of material. And of course, Mike, we need more Star Trek material, don't we? There's not enough written about that show.
We do, but let's do a little more prognostication on the capacities of those. In all likelihood, they weren't HD 5¼ inch floppies. In all likelihood, they were standard definition floppies, which are about 140 kilobytes per side. That's kilobytes. Okay. And now, in all likelihood, you also had the little punchy thing that allowed you to flip over the disk. So let's say that now they're double-sided disks, and they're, say, for the sake of doing the math easier, let's say that they're only full to about 250 kilobytes apiece. So that's 50 megabytes of data, just straight text. And we're also talking about scripts here, in all likelihood, which the per-page density is a lot lower as far as text goes. So if you assume that there's only a couple of K per page, this is still, your number on pages is still fairly accurate in that regard. Regardless, it's going to be a lot of text. We're not talking JPEGs, we're not talking graphics, we're not talking anything really. We're just talking straight text. There are some claims by Drive Savers that kind of make my head itch a little bit. The computers, while the hardware was custom, They were running on the old CPM operating system, which is not dead utterly. So I'm not sure why it took them exactly 3 months to get the data off this. The only thing I can think of on that is like Apple, perhaps that there was a custom firmware for the floppies eking out a little bit extra space. For instance, the Apple implementation of 3.5-inch drives, instead of being 720 kilobytes, was 800 kilobytes, which was part of the reason why it was such a pain to move data back and forth between the PC and Mac, because the PC 3.5-inch drive said, oh no, 720 kilobytes, that's it, buddy. That's all you're getting. And these drives were technically readable on the Mac drives, but it took some control panel finicky to do it. So there are things I buy about drive savers. Hey, look what we did, and things I don't buy about it. But it's drive savers. The bottom line is they've got the data. Somebody's got the data, and we'll see what it is. While I would like more Star Trek, no guarantees that that's what this is going to be, or anything new for that matter. Roddenberry did a lot of work on a lot of shows.
And presumably shopping lists, things like that. Yeah, I spent ages doing the maths, and you just rounded. Oh no, actually, that's the difference, isn't it? I did the maths, you did the math, and that one letter difference. That's why you're faster than me.
Maybe a little more streamlined, right?
I didn't know that about the 800k, 720k difference, but that business of the difference between Mac and PCs, you reminded me of, for so long into Windows, certainly into the 2000, I would describe the difference between Apple and Microsoft is that when you wanted to copy a floppy, something onto a floppy from a PC, you'd put the floppy in and you get the nice animated graphic of the thing copying over until suddenly, crunch, stop, error, disk full, and it's all your fault. And on the Apple side, you put a floppy in, it would look and say, do you know, you haven't got enough room there. You need this much more space. I just thought that one little extra thought, and the fact that it was the computer working for you, not any error must be the user's fault, summed up the philosophy of those two for me.
The thing is with Roddenberry's machine, at least, going back to the original point here, is in all likelihood, the CPM machine, it looks like it came from 82 or 83. That's my feel on the machine. So many of the niceties, many of the OS niceties, you have to think Apple II, not Mac, not the Mac OS in any way. So his CPM machine was very much a brute force machine. It looks like it might have been a luggable. It looks like it might have been ruggedized so you could take it here and there. It's an interesting piece of hardware. The picture they showed is it's an interesting little box made out of a lot more sheet metal than I thought it would be made out of. So we'll see if they talk any more about it.
I actually haven't seen the picture for it. We should put a link to that in the show notes for it.
We will.
This is supposed to be one more thing about news, but there is a Mac and N podcast that's more like this. In fact, actually, the Mac and N podcast network, we got 3 of them. What are the 3 Mac and N podcasts? What do we get from them, and when will we hear from them?
Well, my regular joint, the actual starter Mac and N podcast, not saying that you're not doing a fantastic job, but each show has its own different flavor and tenor. You hear on Mondays on Mac and N and on our SoundCloud host. And that's typically Charles and I with special guests popping in now and again. It depends really on how you like your tech news presented. And also semi-randomly, we do the Mac and N Off-Topic podcast. The most recent episode, just a couple of days after The Force Awakens came out, Charles and I took a look at it critically. So I'm actually pretty excited about what we got going on. I'm still in the middle of retooling the Off-Topic podcast, and it's going to be a little more themed weekly instead of just the random shotgun blast to the face of pop culture. So we're not going to do that anymore. So
the random face of technology in pop culture.
Yes, technology and pop culture. Yeah, nerd stuff.
Exactly. Just keep it reasonably on-off topic. Yeah. Right, this is the first time you've been on One More Thing, and I didn't warn you in advance, though I think you probably knew. One More Thing has a thingy of the week.
Hang on, it's not the first time I've been on the One More Thing podcast, right?
This is Mac and N One More Thing, and it's the episode with nothing in it.
Here's the thing. The D Green is...
Hang on, did you just skip to another podcast?
Okay. Well, then you know all about it. What's your thingy of the week? Yeah? Bring it.
Well, my thingy of the week is the Aukey 4000 milliamp hour battery. Now, we've done battery packs before. They're really not that glamorous. They're not that exciting. They're not that sexy, right? See, here's the thing. This thing, the power in is a lightning port. So, in my purge of micro USB and mini USB, this is the last thing in my power distribution method that I have for my entire family that requires the micro or mini USB cable. So everything I've got now charges with or through lightning. Batteries, devices, everything. So can't go wrong with that. Right now they're on sale at Amazon for $10. Normal price is $20. There are larger capacities from other manufacturers, but the Aukey one is the one I like. As far as size goes, it's about 2/3 the width of my iPhone 5C. It's about 1/8 of an inch thinner than my 5C, and it's almost exactly the same length. So what I've done for some of the devices that get schlepped around the house by various family members, I've got 2 little Velcro dots on the back of the battery, which allows one of the iPod Touches in this house that is a daily, almost hourly use item that cannot be tethered to a wall, allows it to have a constant charge, more or less. It can go 4 or 5 days of regular use without seeing a wall socket. So that, William, is my thing of the week.
I know. I need to tell you my thingy of the week, don't I? I've actually done this before as well. Very specifically this one. A couple of weeks ago, I said my thingy of the week was the iPad Pro, and I want to do it again because I honestly, I thought I would use it on special occasions, but it's replaced my iPad Air vastly more than I expected. It's very perplexing, actually, because it's big enough. I was on a train and I moved up from Apple Watch to phone to iPad Air to iPad Pro, depending on the room available. And I wish I could have gone to a Surface table or something afterwards just to complete it a little bit. I find I'm using it excessively, and it's so fast, and it is. We did a feature, quite a series actually on Mac, getting things done on iPads and Macs, and we're going to do an extra one of how that's changed, how much better that is on just the iPad Pro. So I'm addicted. I just wish more apps would, grow. Some of them have yet to be resized and they look a bit blotchy. Facebook, for example, and anything that calls up the old keyboard is bad. And actually, that's another big surprise. I have loads of keyboards, loads of wireless Bluetooth keyboards, but I write most of the time on the glass of the iPad Air. There's something about that full-size keyboard, the angle of it, and I really like it, apart from there's something weird with the shift key. I have to use the right-hand shift key, because if you tap on the left one, it doesn't always register. There's something hinky about that, and I haven't figured it out yet, but my fingers are learning. So I'm going to go off and learn the keyboard and get some chocolate. Yeah, that sounds about...
Let me just interject a little bit with the iPad Pro. I agree with you on that, but as far as touchscreen compatibility, I have spots on my thumbs that aren't conductive enough, apparently, or something, I don't know, to be used as fingers on my phone. So maybe you've got the same thing going on with one of your digits.
That's really interesting and terrifying. Okay, I think I'm probably just going to erase that from my mind. Listen, this is Macanet. One more thing. But we got to the point where there isn't one more thing left, except I'm William Gallagher. He's...
Okay, I am Mike Wuerthele, managing editor.
Good talking to you. Speak to everybody next week.
So long, everybody.
Strangely compelling, isn't it?